So my name is Ulla Helimo, and I'm sustainability specialist at the Division of Policy and Planning at University of Jyväskylä, same university of that Sami. And I'm presenting to you guys a little bit what we are doing with this information that our researchers are providing us. So as I think all higher education institutes in Finland, our university board has also made the decision to become carbon neutral by 2030. Turku is 2025, but most higher education institutes in Finland have set their targets for 2030. And I think that most university boards have set that target without actually going into much detailed conversation of what it actually means. This conversation has become later on, and we are discussing it now, what it actually means for universities to become carbon neutral. Our university has also made the decision of no net loss of biodiversity by 2030, which is something that I don't think other universities have done yet. And so all this information that we got as a baseline from Sami and his colleagues' research gave us the baseline to do this roadmap. And we call it the roadmap to planetary well-being. We have the WWF's Green Office certificate, and that's our environmental system that requires us also to have an environmental program. But our environmental program has been a little bit before focused on all the properties that we have on campus, etc. But we wanted now to do a lot more ambitious and a bigger program. So it was a long journey to make it and to answer the question also how we actually did it. We got all this information from the researchers and the recommendations from the researchers, and then I went to our procurement specialists and to our property management and to our leadership board and all these different who manage our traveling, and then we went through those recommendations one by one, and we sat down and see what can we actually do here at the university, and so this was sort of the process that we did to have this program in place. Now, what to do with this information? Here are some of the basic concepts that I think are good to be clear to understand what we're actually doing. And so we're talking about carbon neutral, and we're talking about no net loss of biodiversity. But for instance, in Finnish, no net loss of biodiversity is sort of like this, it's a word monster, that is luonnon kokonaisheikentymättömyys. And if I go to our rector or others with this word, they don't really understand what it actually means. So I like to speak about carbon negative and nature positive, which is somehow, it's a step forward, but it's somehow a lot easier for our leadership to understand, even though, because if we think about it, carbon neutral is actually just one specific point in time, the same as no net loss of biodiversity, where the offsetting is actually as exactly as big as our emissions. So that is something that is not going to be like a stable condition that we have. So the continuation of that is, of course, the carbon negativity, or then nature to become nature positive. So we actually have a positive impact on biodiversity. That is the goal, and I think that is it's easier to explain and use these words with the management. And then we're talking about the offsetting. We already discussed, and Jutta was discussing, that we cannot reduce, we cannot reach to carbon zero, because our universities have we exist because we do research. We cannot stop buying laboratory equipment, or we cannot stop traveling, or all in total. So we will probably never reach carbon zero. But to become carbon neutral, we're going to have to have this credible offsetting. Unfortunately, these kind of offsetting models do not exist yet, in our opinion. That would have all these criteria in place, that they would be real, quantifiable, additional, and permanent. We still have a lot of work to do as universities to create these offsetting mechanisms that we can actually use as higher education institutes. We have to be very careful about this because we're not just like some small companies or even bigger companies. We are higher education institutes, so we have to be very careful on what we promise, what we say, and what we actually then do. Because if we say that we're going to be carbon neutral, then we really have to be the whole universities. And then we have the concept of planetary well-being, which is concept that was created by the community wisdom community. Here they actually explain it in this article, published article, and the whole idea of planetary well-being is to reach this state in the planet where both humans and the non-human species can both thrive. That is the idea. So that is our goal here also, to have human well-being and also the well-being for non-human species. The vision and objective of this program, our environmental program, the roadmap for planetary well-being, it's actually we had to like rewrite it several times so that it would be okay for all of our top management at this university also. So from 2030 onwards, at the University of Jyväskylä is carbon negative and nature positive higher education institute that works actively to promote planetary well-being on local, national, and international levels. And the objective is that the University of Jyväskylä invests in reducing its biodiversity and climate impacts and develops the impact calculation methods that Sami is now doing and an offsetting model. By 2030, the university has reduced measurable biodiversity and climate impacts by at least 60% from the 2019 level and offsets the impacts as part of its compensation responsibility. So what this actually means is that we have set the target to reduce our emissions by 60%, and that is, I think, something that we all have to do in besides having the carbon neutral target, to make this the target also on reducing our impact on biodiversity and climate, because it's a lot different if we would now just like say, okay, we could actually now just offset everything, just pay for the compensation package and then say that fine, we are carbon neutral and we are not at loss biodiversity university. But that would be a little bit, not even a little bit, but that would actually be some kind of greenwashing thing that when we actually have to put now a lot of investments on making our impacts less, and then the offsetting is then the final way to offset the impacts that we cannot reduce. What we use as indicators, of course, we calculate the carbon footprint and with CO2 equivalents, and then the offsetting will be, of course, calculated as well when we're gonna start using it. That is both in our climate and then also in the biodiversity. And we have now here put the procurement, so the biodiversity impact of our acquisitions, because that is something that we actually know how to calculate now, and so we have to be able to also offset that. But that is something that we actually don't know yet how to do. I'm really hoping that this new international nature positive universities network will be of an assistance here, because I think all of the universities in the world will be facing this same problem. It's part of, like Sami showed you the map where you can see our biodiversity impacts globally in different parts of this planet. So it's actually part of the university's global responsibility to offset these impacts also in a fair way. So that is something that we still have to think about how we're going to do this. Then we measure our consumer habits. We have a questionnaire that is sent to our students and staff each year. And so we want to see how these consumer habits, they ask like how about the commuting, about the dietary habits, etc. Of our students and staff. So we want to see how that develops. And then we also participate in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings. So in these SDGs from 12 to 15, we follow those also as an indicator. This roadmap to planetary well-being also has an action plan, and we have these 8 goals that are part of this roadmap. And then each of these goals have their different indicators. The indicators that I showed you there in the last slide, they were the indicators of the whole program. But then all the goals have their separate indicators also. And then the roadmap has an action plan that each goal has different actions on how to reach them, and they're in total 59 actions. And there's also who is responsible of executing the action, what is the expected impact, how to measure it, what is the schedule, what are the resources that we need, and what are the risks and presumptions of this action. This is unfortunately only in Finnish, but the program itself is also in English. The idea is that because the university board accepted this the whole program that is until 2030, this action plan is approved by the rector, and so it's not like so heavy process to get that approved. So we're going to update this in a yearly basis, this action plan on how to reach our goals. And these are the 8 goals that I was talking to you about. So I will go through them one by one, but you can also go into our website, jyu.fi/sustainability, and you can find the whole program there. The first one is the change in our consumer habits. So we talk about procurement, our acquisitions. How can we change that? So we actually only purchase what we actually need, and when we do make the purchase, then how can we, for instance, is it possible to think about circular economy or other stuff that is not so highly impacting the biodiversity and climate. Then we have energy, including electricity and then heating. Heating is actually very interesting here because we measure the climate impact. We measured the carbon, but we also measured the biodiversity impact of our heating. And here, for instance, you can see this is like the perfect example, like why we need to measure them both, because here the heating, the central heating, and it's produced mainly by burning peat or wood. And the peat has actually a really high CO2 impact, so it causes a lot of impact on climate. So everyone is now reducing the burning of peat, and then which results to that we are burning actually more wood. But now wood has a higher impact on biodiversity than peat. So now that all the society is trying to become carbon neutral, we are burning less peat, but we are burning more wood. So this has actually caused that the biodiversity impact of our heating has been increasing each year. So we're not going into the right direction. And that is something that we are reporting, and we are also trying to have discussions with the heating companies. So and then there's other consumption, recycling, talk about water use, and then of course food. What do we eat? Then we have the investments. There was one question about investments, and here I will show you why we have this investment here as in the second level. So here are here's the estimation of our last year's CO2 emissions. And you can see that our investments are more than half of it. So it's a really huge piece of the pie. Acquisitions is next, and properties and energy is the second. Why we do these calculations and why we calculate our CO2 emissions, it's not just so that we can say that we are carbon neutral university there and then. It's actually just to see where would our actions have the most impact. And here we can see that we really need to impact our investments. And our university board has already approved a separate plan to reduce the carbon the carbon intensity of our investments. And we are working, Sami and I, with our investment people to make our investments more sustainable each year. So we have a separate plan also for that, and a special, of course, the committee that handles our investments. But this is the reason why we have included investments here, and we will continue including them in our calculations, because it's such a big share of this. And of course, here we don't agree so with how University of Turku shares their pie, because we do not reduce the part that the university properties of Finland compensates, because they compensate, they are carbon neutral. So we also rent from them the same company, but we think that it's compensating this does not sort of reduce our pie. We need to make visible our emissions so that we will reduce our emissions and not be sort of like, because if I would now put a pie here, that would show a lot less proportion in properties and energy, because we compensate it. It would sort of like show this message to our decision makers that we don't really have to do much actions there, because it's not a big problem. So it's very important, like how we present these, and not the and you know, the compensation is not, offsetting is not the same as actually reducing these reducing the emissions. And well, the third one is the changing ways of how we travel and commute. And those are sort of obvious. Sustainable construction, we also always, you know, making, especially like repairing our buildings here. Then comes the offsetting. We actually had a seminar a couple of weeks ago with the higher education institutes and in the whole country, and we had a workshop on how to start developing these like credible offsetting offsetting plans, because we are all going to face some of us a little bit earlier than the others, but the need to do this offsetting, and we need really like good and proper and credible ways of doing it. Then campus development, and then connecting planetary well-being to university policy and planning. This is very, I think, important thing to have here, because we always have these negotiations with the universities, with the faculties and units. So when we give them, for instance, their own carbon footprint and their biodiversity footprint, so they can follow them, and then they will give us some of the actions on how they're planning to reduce it, and also with, of course, other facts also on sustainability. And this has become like a part of this internal model on how we give funds and in the university. And then the last is JYU as a trailblazer, which means our handprint. So this is, we have also made the decisions on what kind of courses, for instance, we teach at the university. We have a open course that is available for everyone, also everyone in the world actually, and it's also in English, and about planetary well-being, that is going to be a mandatory course for all our students, and we are working really hard to increase also the handprint of our university. But that's it for me. Thank you